Love him, hate him, think he's legit, or just full of shit. It doesn't really matter here. I'm only here to talk about his movies. Welcome to listen to the first episode of Seagal Flicks. In this new series, I'm going to review definitely all of his movies from the 80s and 90s, and some movies from the 2000s, but definitely not all of them because there are some really bad ones out there. I'm going to review the movies in their release order. So obviously the first movie is NICO from 1988, also known as Above the Law. I had actually never seen this movie before because it's pretty hard to find in Finland. There is a rental tape from the 80s, but I think it was never released on DVD, neither on Blu-ray. But there is a Swedish Blu-ray which contains Finnish subtitles, but it's obviously hard to find in this country. And it's out of print, so also pretty hard to import. So I picked up the old rental tape. Or actually, it was not a rental tape, it was a tape for the seller of the video rental store. These kind of tapes would be usually uncut. And now you're thinking, what's so interesting about that? Well, Finland had this stupid law in the 80s that movies that would get 18 rating, which is pretty much same as R, were not allowed at all. So all the movies that would get the 18 rating would have to be cut so much that they would finally receive the 16 rating that was allowed. For example, Jean-Claude Van Damme's Bloodsport was cut 20 minutes in Finland. 20 fucking minutes. Think about that. That's fucking disturbing. I'm glad I knew about this so I didn't buy the regular NICO rental tape. I bought the tape meant for the sellers. So it had these warning texts appearing every 15 minutes telling that you should not sell this or rent this to anyone, only for the sellers. It's very, very against the law to do something like that and blah blah blah. I thought it was kind of funny. But those warning texts didn't hurt the experience because they would be on the screen for only a few seconds. But now, the review. This is a very basic 80s action flick, in a good way. Not everything always works, plot, characters, acting, but the most important thing, the action, does work really well. I've seen tons of these lower budget cop versus drug dealer movies like this, but NICO didn't feel too repetitive in its genre. It definitely wasn't anything fresh, but Seagal brought his own uniqueness to the basic formula, so it balanced things up a little bit. NICO is heavier on the plot than most other action flicks of its kind from that era, and the movie benefits from that, so it sticks out more. Seagal usually tries to have a serious message in his movies, this first one being no exception. Police corruption, which will be a theme in several other Seagal movies, is also present in this first movie. And I admire that Seagal tries to have more weight to his movies. But sometimes it doesn't really work and it becomes way too preachy. But in NICO, it's subtle and quite frankly, I like it. So, the basic plot goes like this. Seagal plays NICO, who's Italian detective in Chicago Police Department. Before that, he was in Japan learning Aikido, then in Vietnam War as a member of CIA. He left the CIA because he couldn't accept the torturing one of the CIA members, Kurt Sagan, was doing. Sagan, played by Henry Silva, becomes the main bad guy of the movie as NICO finds out that a bunch of drug dealers are related to Sagan, who still works in CIA. I can see that they have tried. Some of the scenes try to have emotional weight, but it just doesn't work because the execution, mainly acting, isn't convincing enough. Seagal tries, but I've seen him doing better performances in later movies. Some may argue if you can even call Seagal an actor, but uh, let's not talk about that here. The biggest problem I had with the movie was that the main villain wasn't given nearly enough screen time. It would have been better to see at least a couple of more minutes about Sagan. I can still remember him though, thanks to Henry Silva. He is the ultimate bad guy. Just look at that face. He can't be a good guy. Another problem I had was the final fight. You, you can't really even call it that because Seagal beats Zagan way too easily, and I bet it left the audience wanting more. That actually leads to the Seagal trademark things I will talk about in every Seagal Flicks episode. The trademark things are already here, but not so strong as in the later movies. Seagal's serious face, check. Quiet talking, check. Overpowered, check. Doesn't get hit, check. Oh, wait a minute. What the hell is this? The opening scene is one of the most memorable things in the movie. NICO training Japanese guys in a dojo, and the theme music really got me excited. The soundtrack was very basic saxophone, electric drums, nothing special, but it worked. It was directed by Andrew Davis, whose best work is The Fugitive, starring Harrison Ford. Great film. I should probably review it someday. Davis also directed what many consider to be the best Seagal movie, Under Siege. He also directed one Chuck Norris movie in the 80s, Code of Silence, said to be one of Norris's best movies. Um, there's a church bombing scene which was well executed, and I think it captured the true horror of a situation like that pretty well. At least it's one of the scenes that comes to first to my mind when talking about this movie. So I think it was done pretty well. This brings to my mind Nico's wife, who was actually played by Sharon Stone before she became famous. But nothing else to mention about her. The best thing, the fight scenes are enjoyable and satisfying. Not as extreme or even fast paced as in Seagal's later movies, but energetic enough. Seagal is obviously in a good shape in this one. He is pretty slim though, at least when you compare him to the other 80s action stars, but what he loses in muscle mass, he wins in height. This guy is a fucking tower. But about the action scenes more, the camera doesn't shake. We can actually see the choreography, and there are some brutal kills. Limbs are broken, blood is shed. Actually, Seagal films have always been pretty violent in comparison to, well, let's say Stallone, Schwarzenegger, or even Van Damme. And what I mean by that, I'm sure Stallone, Schwarzenegger, and Van Damme have had very violent movies, but with Seagal movies, pretty much every Seagal film is violent. NICO has some unintentionally funny scenes and other scenes that are meant to be funny and are funny. I laughed at the scene where Seagal is above a moving car and is holding one of the bad guys inside who is screaming relentlessly. It seems that Seagal actually does most of his stunts here, which is a good thing. It's always a big plus and makes the actor more believable. What is not convincing is his running. Seagal running is one of the funniest things ever. It's hilarious how he wobbles his hands around while chasing one of the bad guys who fears for his life when this big guy is after him. But yeah, I guess that's it. NICO was pretty good. The lesson we learned in this movie: we should be more careful about CIA members thinking that they are above the law and can do anything. Seagal was convincing enough in his debut movie that made its budget back twice, uh, something around 18 million that it made, and the budget was around 7 million. Can't really call that a success, but not really a flop either. His later movies would prove to be a lot more successful, and Seagal's career as an action star would only go up for the next few years. 3 out of 5.